what makes a meaningful life? Who am I underneath all of these titles and tasks and accomplishments? Who am I now after becoming a mother? That was a big shift in our identity. And we were just trying to find that truth of
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if you're new here. I'm super delighted to have two amazing guests with me today. We have Shandra Bauer, who is a yoga teacher. She's a certified mindful breathing facilitator. She's a physician assistant and the co-creator of the Inner Compass program for women in medicine with Dr. Sarah Webber, who is also joining us today. She is a pediatrician, a coach. She is a writer and all things we talked about before we started here, a multi-passionate person who's also involved in the well-being space. And today we're really going to talk to you about how they joined together and are now on a mission to help women in medicine find their inner compass and live in alignment with their core values and true selves. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
you.
And who would like to start and share a little bit more about your story? Because I know I already have invited you to be a recurring guest on my channel because there's so many different facets of your lives that we could talk about. But just a little part of your story today that kind of led you to each other and to your mission with the Inner Compass program.
I'm Chandra. I live in Madison, Wisconsin. I have three children. I'm married to my partner, Adam, and we've lived in Madison for the last, how long has it been? 11 years or so. And what led us here, and I'm sharing all of this because it relates to how Sarah and I know each other. My husband started his residency here in pediatrics. That's how him and Sarah met. And I was working as a physician assistant in internal medicine, so working full time in primary care. And yeah, that's kind of how I began my life here in Madison and how Sarah and I met. Um, and the experience that first really brought us together was a shared experience of becoming mothers.
Mm,
So we had our first kiddos just 5 days apart. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, which that was 11 years ago now.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Hmm.
I was
And
an intern. Adam and I were interns. Just to set that stage.
for,
Sorry,
Well,
Sandra.
that's a whole nother discussion we can
yeah,
elaborate on. I
uh-huh.
mean, yeah, definitely. It's people will need to hear that part of your story too at some point. How you navigated that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's so much more I can share about how I got from there to where I am now. I'm going to just do a short version. But I ended up, I worked in internal medicine for, it was 6 or 7 years, really loved that work, loved developing those close, meaningful relationship with patients, getting to hear patients' stories and guiding them through, complex medical issues or life issues. But through a really big loss of my own, ended up leaving medicine, kind of not really knowing what was next, but just knowing this isn't where I need to be right now, and stepped into this next phase of my journey and was home with my kids for a few years, and then found my way to teaching yoga and into the grief work that I do. And, along this journey, Sarah and I are walking these, journeys with each other, which from the outside were similar, but also really different. But this thread that was carrying us through was like, what makes a meaningful life? Who am I underneath all of these titles and tasks and accomplishments? Who am I now after becoming a mother? That was a big shift in our identity. And we were just trying to find that truth of who we were. And so just went on this journey together of trying everything,
Yeah.
everything under the sun, it feels like. And eventually, and not eventually, I mean, we're still on this journey, right? We know it never really ends. Found our way where we are navigating, and I say we as if we're one person. I mean, we're We're
I
doing this
feel like I've
separately and
already
together.
joined you in this union of people because I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, this is how we all kind of the energies found each other, right? I'm like, so I'm gonna invite myself into this, but not part of that story. I'm just kidding you.
Yeah.
But please continue.
But that's how it is, right? Like we all have these personal stories, yet there's these like universal threads that weave through them. And we started to live from the inside out is kind of how it felt, rather than from the outside in.
Mhm.
And we, Sarah was already doing this work in well-being, and she can talk more about that, not me. But we started to have this desire to share this in some way with other women that we knew were most likely going through similar experiences, but maybe felt alone in it. And just over the years, this Inner Compass program kind of came together. Yeah, so I guess that's what I'll share for now. I'm curious to see what Sarah wants to say.
Yeah, Sarah, please do. And then I'd love to showcase for the people tuning in, with that shift from the outside to the inside, like really granularity on what that looks like and what that means. But before we do that, well, it might be part of Sarah's story, but if you haven't been around my channel too much, know that I do go on tangents with everything that you say. So
Perfect.
we can take you around a few blocks today. But before we dive into more on exploring what that looked like for you, Sarah, I would love to hear more about your story and what brought you here today as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny to think about like, what is my story and how do I tell it? Because we can make a lot of different meanings, I think, out of, when we look back at what has happened and how things have gone. But, the way I would kind of briefly explain it for myself is I was one of those people who always wanted to be a doctor. I had some medicine in my family, no one who was a physician. I liked and was good at science and math. And really among the people I knew, like you became a doctor. Like I didn't know a lot of people with other professions who used those skills. And I've always been sort of that like aspirational want to change the world person, though, that's shifted with age of what that actually looks like and means, but kind of having that deep desire to do something of meaning. And so I went into medicine like just excited about it. And in a lot of ways, I actually liked medical training because I love learning. But it also, I like to say it sort of like took my inner Enneagram 3, if you know what that is, which is like a lot of doctors probably are Enneagram 3.
I hear it a lot. Everyone asks me, do you know the Enneagram? I'm like, Enneagram 3? Or like, this is a repetitive theme on this channel.
I don't know. Right. I don't know if I don't actually think that is maybe like, again, getting this, like, what's this true inner part of me? But that part of me who can be driven, is motivated by what other people think about me, wants to do a good job because I care, but also just to show that I can do a good job. If I'm being honest, like that part just got put in the driver's seat. And so while I did very well and was successful in training and in my early career, it was like this kind of slow road to burnout. And adding in there becoming a mother and just being extremely exhausted because I have those kids who don't sleep through the night. And so I think I became this person who was almost fully motivated by what was out there. There were a couple things that I would say like I did just because I liked them that I held on to, like gardening. Like there are a couple core things, but a lot of the things that I really innately love to do or appreciated about myself really went to the wayside in training, which just isn't surprising or unique, right? But in that process, it was like I didn't know who I was at all. Like everything was through the outside filter and lens, or the lens of logic, which isn't bad, but is obviously not the only way to make decisions. And so in meeting Shandra and then our friendship growing, especially during the pandemic, where we lived, we're kind of on the 99th percentile in terms of like the caution that people practiced. there was a long period of time before we were in people's houses or socializing. And so we would just walk outside. And so we started this process of like almost like external processing. Like we were just going through things together, sorting through, I read this thing, or, and along the way, we'd been doing things like meditation, yoga, all the things, we can talk about that we've tried to sort of fix things or, figure out what this life is all about. And I think that iterative process showed us, like Shandra said, that so much of the unhappiness, even I would say anxiety in my case, in our lives came from being motivated by things outside ourselves or making choices based on that. And so it's this work of learning that like there actually is some deep part of you that like has some wisdom that is not necessarily accessible to all of us in this moment right now. But when you can act from that place, things shift. So many things shift for you. It doesn't necessarily change your whole life in a like objective way of someone looking from the outside. But I think your own experience of life and because we're both in medicine, I think we recognize how medical culture specifically and how being a woman in our society create certain conditions that make that work harder. And there are specific things that are important to do in order to connect to that inner part of you. I didn't say anything about my life. I just realized.
It is a combination, right? You share as much as you want, share as much as you want, but yes, please, let's hear a little bit more about your life.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I'm a mom. I have 3 kids. I really do like gardening and growing food is just something that I love to do. If I could I'm actually outside right now. Being outside is like, I wish I had a job where I could be outside all the time. That's still kind of a thing I would like to figure out in my life.
That would be something that we're gonna put that one down. Okay, Sarah wants job outside, but you live in Madison, so
I live in Madison. Yep.
In the winter, I live in Houston, so like you wouldn't want a job outside right now.
Right.
But
Yes.
so we have to get like more specific on where.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. From April to November. Yeah. And then I'll be inside doing the other part of the inside job, whatever I have.
Sounds good. You'll always live inside, but okay, interesting. We're gonna get really philosophical there for a second.
Yeah.
Somebody, I have a temporary tattoo on my arm. It's hard to know like how to turn it. Temporary true on my arm. Okay, this is the tangent I'm bringing you on in this moment. And I was at Laura Hockman's house, or her parents' house, if you know Laura. I was there with her mom, and we were talking about this tattoo. And Laura's like, "Is that real?" And I said, "No, it's temporary." And her mom's like, "Yeah, well, it is real. It's a real temporary tattoo." I'm like, "Well, are we real? Like, do we actually know what's real?" And then, so that was just a little tangent. If you all want to explore, like, gosh, we could really get into the weeds here of what's real, what's not. This is all an illusion. We're all in like what is it called? The Matrix, or like the Truman Show or something. Yeah.
I love those kinds of discussions.
Like, is this really happening? I mean, it doesn't even matter. Like when we get so stressed out and perseverate about everything, like, does it actually matter? Like it actually doesn't. Matter. So, but thank you. So Sarah, you would like to have a job that is more outside, but currently
the fantasy.
Your fantasy that you can bring to reality. We do know you can create that. We do know.
Whenever I can be outside, my family knows this. Like, you guys want to eat dinner outside? Oh, again, but this is what you get.
That's hilarious. I grew up with that. My dad always wanted to eat outside too, but we live in like mosquito havens. I'm like, oh gosh, he hates them more than I do. So fortunately for me, we lived in Illinois, so with your Madison weather, probably synced up. We probably could have said hi to the sky and been waving to each other. Yeah. Well, back to reality here, or what we perceive reality to be in these moments. So you came together through the shared relationship and motherhood in medicine, and you're both on a journey to really lean in to say, what is this life about? Shandra, I did hear part of the aspects of a catalytic event that really sounded like it shook you. I definitely don't want to bring up anything that is too vulnerable, but kind of just questioning that shift of what did it look like to start to say like, oh my gosh, I'm no longer going to live for this external validation and for others. And I'm start to connect with my inner compass.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that, I brought up the loss because that it's so hard to tell my story without telling that part of it. Because I think often we do have these losses or changes or shattering moments that, for me, it's like I think of my life as kind of the before and after of that. And so in 2017, my sister died. So she died suddenly. She was 26. So it was like tragic and sudden and really just changed everything about myself and my life and what mattered to me. And it led me on this journey of turning inward. I think grief and loss, because can feel so profound and so disorienting, that it really turned me inward to see what mattered most to me, to figure out who am I now that the world that I'm living in just feels so different. And so that was like really the beginning for me of that journey of discovering who I was now. And that journey continues. And then just a few years after that, in 2020, I lost my dad. He died of lung cancer. So it was a different type of loss. But again, I felt like just took me into this even deeper inner space of knowing myself. And for me, a big part of that journey, what kind of held me through that process were some of the practices that were already part of my life. And for me, that was meditation and yoga and being out in the natural world. And so those, forms of embodiment or being with ourselves just clarified and deepened that sense of living from this space of inner knowing.
I really appreciate you sharing that and knowing, our society kind of steers themselves into busyness to avoid the reality that we're only here for a short time. And when it comes to the grief, I really appreciated before I met you, and it caught my attention that I figured someone that becomes a grief facilitator knows the depths of that. And I'm so sorry to hear of your losses.
Thank you.
And I also want to express appreciation for you now supporting others to walk with them on their journey through grief. I'm going to just take a pause to appreciate the life of your sister, the life of your dad, and you sharing, that part of how they impacted you and their story with us today.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And this, work that I do facilitating grief circles and these grieving programs, and also the inner compass work. It's like, it is very related. They seem like these two separate things, but they're really not. It is a way to continue to honor them, to honor my sister, to honor my dad, and also to honor myself and this, different path that I've been led on. I just continue to be surprised by where life takes me.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I share a catalytic event. I left surgery after my ex-boyfriend died, and I was too tired to answer his phone call. And I just really know how I had unprocessed grief for 5 years and survivor's guilt, and I wasn't living at all. So I know the power that your work has to help people to get back to living and honor the loved ones who passed through, truly giving themselves permission to live. It took me a while to give myself permission to do that.
Yeah, that I heard David Kessler. I don't know if you're familiar with his work at all. He's has done a lot of work around grief and dying and being with that process. And I heard him say recently that, you know, our work in being human really is to live fully and to grieve fully.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think can feel really hard, especially in the culture we live in. It's like a grief phobic, death phobic culture. And so a lot of us just jump right back into the living, which can look like busyness or distraction. And there's no judgment around that. It's just like how we need to get through it. But the grieving fully, that part is missing so much because we don't have the spaces or the skills to know how to be with that. And so that's really what drove me to that work is like I was seeking that desperately to be in community with other people in my loss and couldn't, it was hard to kind of find the spaces that felt like they would fit for me. And so, yeah, that work is just such an honor for me to sit with people in their losses. And it's just so powerful and so transformative when we really bring our full selves, our authentic selves to our grieving process. Which, like I said, the Inner Compass program and the grief, it's like they're one and the same. When we have a loss and we grieve, we inherently transform.
Yeah.
And then when we come to seek our inner truth, our inner compass, some sort of transformation, there is some inherent grieving in that process too, whether it's a change that we want or a change that you know, was thrust upon us. It's like that grief has to be witnessed, but there just aren't spaces for it. And so that is important to us, to Sarah and I, as part of the Inner Compass program. It's not like it's a grief program, that's not what it is, but we just know and honor grief as part of this process of transformation.
Yeah, it's funny when we think of, it's not funny, but when we think about how to tell people about our work, and granted, like we, you know, we aren't marketers or business people in the classic sense. So setting that aside, one of the things we struggle with is like, we're not promising you anything, right? Like this is not 5 steps to XYZ. Like sometimes when you go through these things, and we both had this, things get harder for a while. Not even like grief, just the personal work of transformation. If you're feeling stuck, unhappy, disconnected, you know, all of those things, if you're gonna meet that truly, there are gonna be changes and hard things to face and difficult feelings. And so we bring that work into like how we work with women too, which is, yeah, we're not trying to sell you a certain outcome, because that wouldn't be authentic.
No, it wouldn't. No. And it's important that you showcase that grief comes in many forms, grief of loss of any type. And as you transform, you're letting go of all the things you thought you needed to be, aspects of who you thought you needed to be, parts of your life you thought made you you. And that is painful. Or even just confronting that, people, even in Kristen Neff's book, Fierce Self-Compassion, she says for people who didn't have self-compassion innately and weren't given it in childhood, like it's painful to start to develop self-compassion, even though it should feel like this fluffy thing. It's not. This is misconception because you're confronting, like, I could have had this my whole life. Like my whole life, I could have given myself love and not so much self-hate had I just had it shown to me early. So I know personally with sitting with, when I left surgery, I was not well for 5 years. And I wasn't going to make it until I sat with the suck. Like I was so unwell from my eating disorder. Like I had given up on life, and it took me to just say, I'm going to try one more thing. And that's to sit with this. And that ultimately saved my life, but it sucked. It sucked so bad. And so part of this community was because I was trying to do it alone. I'm like, oh, that was so life threatening to try to do it alone. And you can't. So you're holding this container, like the offer is like, we're holding this container with the tools that have people that are walking this with you that are at different stages of this partnership, that when it gets hard, we're here for you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that is part of how this formed, was I think us just seeing that just, though, like she said, our paths are different or parallel or intertwined, whatever you want to use, it's been the like coming together and going apart that I think has been like an accelerator or a deepener or both in the process. Because when you're reflecting back on people and you're seeing like we're having different, the context of our experience is different, but the themes are the same.
Mm-hmm.
There's something really powerful about that.
Yeah. And you bring people together. Both, you have, your program is 6 months, right? A 6-month journey together, and it includes group
Mhm.
sessions and then individual sessions. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm just thinking that power in that group, and then the capacity to process it with 2 unique perspectives with both of you. I would love for you to kind of, if I was entering this program, like walk me through what I can expect.
Mm. Yeah. Do you want to go? You go ahead, Sarah. You looked like you were ready to speak.
I can go ahead. So, the thing that I think both of us have learned in different ways, I'll speak from my experience. I had experienced therapy in medical school. I had a lot of anxiety, and I remember very specifically my therapist saying, like, I was really paranoid. I was like the hypochondriac med student, but like extreme. So I remember her thinking like, well, how likely is XYZ thing to happen? And I would be like, my brain doesn't care, because it knows that 1 in 100,000 people it happens to, and who says it's not me? So like the logical approach, or the kind of cognitive behavioral approach to my anxiety, it didn't work. My brain was like, I will outsmart your approach or whatever. And so what really transitioned my own experience of my well-being was embodied practices. And so, both of us, and Shandra has more of the experience in teaching these things than I do. I have some mindfulness training. She's a very experienced yoga teacher, along with some of her grief training that includes some somatic approaches. But for both of us, we feel like if you go straight to kind of pen and paper, what do you value? What's most important to you? The things that come out may or may not be true, actually.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so what we start with is like getting in your body safely, in whatever, in the way that is okay for you, and start to get to know what it's telling you. So learn something called like an embodied yes and no, which is like, what is that gut feeling in your body when you definitely are a yes, or definitely a no, or an unsure? And then we walk through, and so we have a lot of different practices to help people get in their bodies, get in the different parts of themselves, like the wise part of you, or the future self. People often use that practice as sort of like this wise future self, which sometimes sheds some of your conditioning. And so that's a lot of the group work, is kind of working through some of those aspects on the way toward like, what is your intention? What is most important to you? And what do you want to do with that, now that you've recognized it? And then the one-on-one work, I'll use kind of a coaching container, which, your folks probably know what coaching is, but it's this process of like individual transformation where I'm sort of a guide facilitator, not giving you advice. I'm just using tools and questions to help kind of uncover things, get to the root of things. And, there's a little positive psychology aspect in there, which we touch on lightly, because we don't, we're not trying to say everything's great if it isn't. But and then Chandra does embodiment work, which you can probably talk a little bit more about what that is.
Just wanted to kind of reflect back some things that I heard, and important for people, because a lot of people who go into mindset only coaching, they do say values, but these values are usually the ones that they are like the ones that shoulds, like the societal ones.
Exactly.
and we're so disconnected from our body. And for someone like with, a long history of eating disorder and then PTSD, like my signals in my body are like, I have to trust my brain because my body is like, like what your brain was doing, my body does that. And actually my brain does it too. So I'm like, that's where both I had, multiple modalities, but just to reflect back what you said, like, okay, all this core values work when people are, oh, those are definitely my core values. Like having someone to challenge that and really check in with yourself. And then, but that disconnect, especially in medicine, in order to make it through, people dissociate from their body. So you said, get into your body safely. I really appreciated that you had that just verbal cue of like, we're aware that not everyone's going to feel safe. And that if you pace and then you explore and you have, two people here that have walked through it, that have awareness of what are the signs if that person's kind of having a trauma response, and let's tone it down and create the safe container so that everyone feels that they're supported to, I'm going to go into my body a little bit and then, go back and it's not flooding. So just really love how just in what you communicated, it was that awareness that we're not going to jump everyone right into their body because they'd be like, oh, and then they're going to overwhelmed and they're going to quit. And then they're going to feel like, oh my God, give me my money back. Right. So I'm here to say these are two very trauma informed individuals here that have awareness. So thank you for highlighting that. And Shandra, I'd love to hear more about your embodiment practices.
Yeah, I can just piggyback on what you just said, because that is so important to me. Bringing this trauma-informed lens to all of the work that we do. I have done some training, like formal training in trauma, and then lots and lots of just self-led learning on that thread, partially because of the way that trauma has affected me in my own body and in my life. And then also when I first started teaching yoga, I went and taught at a sober living house where my sister had lived. That was just really special to me, still is. But went and taught to women there who were living there as they were in recovery for their substance use disorder. And it's hard to find a person who has a substance use disorder that doesn't have a history of trauma. And so it was just so important to me. And that was just right when I was starting out as a yoga teacher to bring that knowledge and that understanding of trauma to the spaces that I facilitated. Because just like you said, getting into the body can feel very, very unsafe for a lot of people for very good reasons. And so yeah, we really try to invite people into whatever we're offering. Everything is optional. So, choosing to not do a practice is just as important as choosing to do a practice. Because that is one of the ways that you get to experience this inner knowing of like, oh, I know. And whether that's coming from your head or in your body, like, I know I shouldn't be doing this practice right now, is just another way to get to know yourself. And so yeah, that is something I'm really passionate about, and just shows up in all of the work that I do, offering people spaces to get in touch with this sense of embodied presence. And so the one-to-one sessions or the embodiment work that we would do in groups is ways for us to practice and explore connecting, to this inner sense of knowing ourselves, which can be through sensations in the body, which can be through getting to learn to sit with emotion. It can be a way to practice setting boundaries. And so, the embodiment practices kind of build on whatever it is that maybe we did in group together, or like what that person specifically is wanting to work on.
So beautiful. I feel like my body just has like these tears in my eyes because I feel how beneficial this will be for so many people. It's like, you just want to cry because it's like such great value. I'm just gonna hold back because I've been societally trained to hold them back.
I'm encouraging people to cry.
I'll probably let it go later. It just feels so beautiful. And the way that you present it, right, is just truly connecting people at a soul level, and they can just let it out. They can just be, they can just allow themselves to be. And like you said, an invitation, I find the invitation is such a supportive tool when it comes to trauma-informed anything. This is an invitation. You have autonomy because people are used to not feeling in control of their own agency, their own mind and their own body. Wow, that's really,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was saying it's really powerful. It's definitely bringing a lot of emotion into me in like a really supportive way. And I'm just feeling a lot of gratitude for you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And, you know, some of it has come from, as Chandra alluded to earlier, we have tried a lot of things. It's, I don't know, there's so many like emotions on the journey we've had of just trying all the things, but, you know, even, I would say like, I'm a high body feeler. Like I feel a lot of, a somaticizer would be the way that, you know, it would be taught in medicine. So, I've always been used to feeling a lot of things, but even I've been surprised at things we've tried that weren't in a container of being led by someone who is aware that not everyone wants to XYZ or everyone feels safe with everything, and been really triggered and in a very surprising way. You know, like I went into it voluntarily on purpose. There was this one breathing workshop that Chandra and I went to, and there were a whole host of things that, you know, maybe bothered me about it, but we did this breathing exercise that she said could kind of be transformational. You know, all these things can happen. And at the end, she had us all get in a circle and touch each other, not an invitation. And I remember, I mean, I was like,
I'm already freaking out. My whole body's freaking out.
And
I wasn't there. You weren't there.
And I'm the kind of person who generally like, well, historically, just like does the thing, right? Like, I'm going to do it right. I'm here. We're doing the circle. I'm whatever. And I was like, I have to leave. We're done. And I just left, which was,
yeah.
But
I'm
you
so
know,
grateful.
like, which was the right choice. But also I was just like, yeah, we just don't want to create those experiences for people if we can avoid them, knowing that you can't, you know, you can't, no space is perfect, but
yeah. Brene Brown calls them brave spaces now instead of safe spaces, because you just never know. I mean, a trigger would be I get asked to go to restaurants or in a pool often, or like on social media. Me starting a YouTube channel was very triggering for someone with body dysmorphia and body image distress, because I edit my own videos and it's like exposure therapy, right? And I was like off for a little bit. So you just never know, like the things that people are like, oh yeah. And you know, if people, you hear a lot more about neurodivergence and whether we want to put a label on it or not. I was just experiencing, you know, when you were saying about touching, or even after, you know, with COVID's changing of virtual to remote, like my work started virtual and then all of a sudden we're going in person. And it's like, I started having panic attacks while we're in this like big crowd, and I felt trapped and things like, and people, you know, they are say, oh, well, they judge you for your lack of desire to be in certain work situations that are feeling unsafe to people, without stepping back and to say, who are we not catering to and what's coming up for them, and what might be a situation to help them to thrive, and not constantly putting them into these situations, because it can look so different and so part of our regular day life. But some people are just really, it's not safe for them to be in highly stimulating environments, to be touched. We know that breathing for people that have issues with their oxygen and their lung function, you know, feel like they're suffocating. That's not helpful to bring awareness to the challenges I'm having breathing right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And everything too, we're offering as like, it's non-prescriptive. We're not saying like, we're going to do this practice and you're going to feel this way. It's like, all of it is just, or that like, because I'm a yoga teacher and I teach meditation, I'm not saying these are the things you need to do to XYZ. It's just like, we're going to offer up some things and you get to try it.
Yeah.
And that's a form of self-inquiry. It's a way to get to know yourself. Like maybe you'll try meditation and you decide, I don't like that. That's fine. You don't need to do meditation.
Yeah.
So everything, it's just like, there's no way that this should go. It's just like, let's try it if you want to or not. And that can be a way to get to know yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to say, asking themselves why they don't like it.
That's what I was just
Yeah.
gonna
Like,
say.
I don't like this. What's coming up for me? Not to force
Mhm.
yourself to like it, but to gain insight as to why you don't feel like you like it.
Right. Right. So we gently incorporate some amount of parts work into what we do. I mean, we are not therapists, but if, you know, for people who haven't heard of internal family systems, I do think that framework provides for you a way to have some compassionate inquiry. This is feeling really uncomfortable, or I feel really unsafe. Like, what is that part of me that feels unsafe? What is it trying to tell me? Or what does it need from me right now? So if you can, and sometimes you can't, sometimes the answer is like unsafe, need a break.
Yeah.
That's fine. If it's possible, you can also say, this is uncomfortable. What's behind that? Is there a story? Is there a need? And then you might find something out that's really helpful.
I like the length of time that y'all have for your program to at least be the 6 months, right? Because we're high achievers. Oh my gosh, 6 months. I can't do it. It's too long. I'm like, no, is that even? I mean, honestly, this program could be multiple years long.
Yeah.
Because each layers, so that 6 months feels like it's so appropriate to give people space to breathe, to try, to work through it, to have support. So I wanted to say that for people that feel like they want to rush things. My goal as a coach often is to slow people down. I'm like, I can get you where you want more efficiently if you slow down right now, so we can assess what you're going through, because otherwise people run away. I mean, I say it from my own experience. I ran away from surgery, and like I didn't pause to really ask myself what's coming up for me. I wasn't ready. Like you said, it's like we're not always ready. Like intellectually, like that's the lesson I learned, but like multiple years later we might apply it, right? And that's without judgment. It's like I learned that 5 years ago and I'm finally applying it now, and that was the right point of my life to apply it.
Yeah, this work, whether we like it or not, is generally not immediate. Like it unfolds. So yeah.
It brings to mind too, like breaking the arrival fallacy and learning to enjoy the process, right? Because you're like, oh my God, I'm going to feel so great at the end of this. You know, you're like, okay, no, maybe not. You might actually feel like crap, but it will be so freeing, most likely. And just thinking, you know, I read a lot about happiness now, and like happiness isn't really an outcome. It's part of the journey, and to allow ourselves to get comfortable with like each emotion. Yeah. And just be there for like every part of being human, and how if we allow ourselves to do that, how much fear we can release, because I'm really afraid that I'm going to get into this deep, dark depression. Okay. Probably might. I'm a human, probably have some instances where that happens. I'm actually leaving, my job ends this upcoming Friday. So talk about grief. I'm going through that right now, even though it's unplanned. It's a planned departure. It's a strong, perfect time, but the grief of what was, the grief of what wasn't, the grief of what is. Yeah. So it's just allowing yourself to be present, because my immediate reaction is I'm going to go throw myself into more work, apply to like 18 other jobs, and, you know, be so busy. But the universe had other plans for me, because in order to live within my integrity, I had to resist that. So y'all being on this channel is so appropriate for me right now. So thank you.
Right. If we were to say with the outcome, I think we would use the words like aliveness. Like we hope that you feel more alive, more whole, like you can be all the parts of yourself. That doesn't always feel like happiness there, but it probably feels like more joy, more ease, more integrity. Like you said, this sense of being aligned. And that does feel pretty good. I just don't think happiness is the exact word necessarily.
You're right. Yeah. Free. I like free, expansile. I get this image of someone frolicking in the fields, right? Medicine to me, social things is like rigid, like boxed in. And then you get
Mhm.
the opportunity to just be fully you with like no apology. And it just feels
Mhm.
expansile without limits and free, and you can breathe and like you frolic when you want, you go hide and hibernate when you want. You know, there's going to be some storms, there's going to be some sunny skies. It's the image. That's the image that came to my mind. So,
Mhm.
I
I
love that.
love that. Yeah, like it's all part of being human. That's what I've really learned from grieving, especially is like learning how to hold it all. The grief, the gratitude, the joy, the sorrow, and that as we open ourselves to be with all of it, especially the hard stuff, because that's usually the stuff that we're like, I just want the joy and the happiness.
mhm.
There is more aliveness, there is more vitality, which doesn't mean everything's easier or, happy all the time, but it feels, yeah, bigger, more expansive.
Yeah.
So I really resonate with your description.
Do you all do the self-compassion work in your program?
Yes, but a
Mhm.
little differently.
Tell me more.
Well, I think both of us have had a lot of trouble with like that even though we do contemplative practices, I think sometimes the self-compassion work has felt hard. So, and maybe I'll let Chandra talk about the way that we do it because it was her idea.
I'm like, wait, what are you,
Okay, I'll talk about it. So,
what are you
Elizabeth
talking about?
Gilbert, who is a writer.
Oh, leather. Okay. Now I know what you're talking
I
about.
know, I know. Well, we were just talking about this the other day about how this is such a more freeing and easy way for us to practice self-compassion, which is this program that Elizabeth Gilbert developed on her Substack, which is called Letters from Love.
Mhm.
And it's this process of writing yourself a letter from, could be love, universe, God, whatever sort of feels like it could be from compassion. And you just start writing like, dear love, what would you have me know today?
Mm.
And
I'm gonna
often
have to
just amazing things come out.
I'm gonna have to
Mhm.
start open. I get those emails and I get the emails and I haven't opened them. I was gonna go to Liz Gilbert and Martha Beck's workshop together in Toronto, and I'm not going.
Mm.
So I feel like I'm not opening them just because I'm processing through that.
Mhm.
I'm not
The
going to
grief
that, which is okay. It's all right. It's all right. But no, I love that. I love that. And the reason I even brought it up was just thinking about when we're in that state of suffering or with someone and providing that compassion. Like I didn't realize that
Mhm.
compassion is like suffering with. And it makes so much sense because we're not going to like necessarily feel the need to practice compassion when everything is going well, right? We're just going to be like, oh, yay. But then when we're feeling that deep pain or something doesn't go as we thought it should, quote unquote, or we're just feeling that, oh, here's that not enough feeling again. Like when I observe that now, you just like, oh, give love for that part of myself that thought that there was a definition for enoughness that was external to who I already am, And so I love that you have brought in self-compassion in a way that is authentic to you. It's authentic to your program to bring in something that feels more aligned with how you want to
Yeah.
practice it.
Mhm. And that practice, well, one might not resonate with everyone, which is fine. And also, can feel kind of forced or fake at first too. Like people are like, who's writing me this letter? Love? What does that even mean? And so it can be like, even if it feels awkward or fake at first, that's okay. And when we can though find this connection to this voice of love or compassion or whatever we want to call it, that's coming from within us, um, that can just be a really powerful experience. And the other way that I think we bring it into is through like parts work, as we look at all these different parts of ourselves, like, oh, there's that anxious part, or there's that perfectionist part. When we separate ourselves a little bit from just, rather than being like, that's all of me, there can be what we call our big S self. This is from IFS, like our true self, that part that can be curious and compassionate. And there's a whole list of C words that I can't think of right now, confident. We can then look at those parts, like my perfectionist part. I've done so much work with her because she just wants to get everything right and she wants to do everything the most and try the hardest and just be the best. And looking at her as like, a lot of times it's like a wounded part of us, like a little child almost. I can be like, oh, honey, you are trying so hard. Like, that's so sweet that you just want to be the best at everything. But let's just come sit down next to me for a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's been another way too, that we kind of integrated or weave it in.
I love that. Oh, honey.
And just to I know.
Like you would to
Just,
like a kid, if you're a parent or a
yeah.
niece or nephew or something, just like, what would you tell them if they were saying these things to you? Usually you'd be like, oh, that's hard.
If
Mhm.
you've done the work, unfortunately,
Right.
people might be, if they haven't stepped back, please step back for your child's sake, if not your own.
Mhm.
And to be clear, we are not always like that with our children.
Yeah.
Let's just no illusions here that we are parents who are always emotionally available to our children. But what would our wisest, most compassionate self do if we were resourced and well rested and all of those things?
Mhm.
Valid. I don't have kids, so there's no judgment or insight for my dog. My dog is perfect, so I don't have the opportunity to observe him in his imperfections.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I think with pets, that sometimes like is the place we can experience unconditional love like more easily than anywhere else.
It's true. Yeah, because he actually is one of my life teachers. I'm like, he has gone through heck with me. He taught me how to be more emotionally intelligent because I could see my emotions' impacts on him. And it trained me to keep my emotions and let them be felt at the door before I walked into our space, and to like be very intentional with how I'm communicating with him and looking at him. And if I am very short, because I'm also not perfect, and this has happened recently, I'm like, I'm going to bring him to boarding because I am at my, there was a hurricane here, or there was power outages, and I'm like, God, that monster came out of me today. And I went to boarding. I was like, for his safety and so that he continues to love me, I'm going to put him here away from me while I feel all this right now.
Sounds like a self-compassionate move there.
Yeah.
What dogs can teach us if we allow ourselves to learn, right?
The other thing that comes to mind that, I think, well, two things that I just want to say. One is, I make the joke about us as imperfect parents, but I do think in the younger version of myself, I would not uncommonly have people say, how do you do it all? And I would sort of be like, just do, right? Because I was just like, thank God people think that I'm doing it all. But I think something that's like really important for us is to like not create the illusion that because we are leading this work that we have reached some destination that other people are trying to get to, because none of that is true. It's just that we have the experience, the words, some tools, some frameworks that we think will help people in their journey, maybe have it happen a little faster or a little deeper or a little less alone. And so I just like, that's really important, I think, for us to make clear.
And if someone said something different, I would say they're either sociopathic and delusional,
right?
Or they're really insecure and they're hiding behind a facade. So it takes security and self-awareness and high integrity to say what you did. And if people say, well, screw this, I'm going to go look for a program that would, I'm like, well, you're going to be going with people that are lying to you. So don't do that. You stay right here if you want. It's an invitation to stay here if you want. But just to put that out there, like you also will not find one that truly delivers this state of perfection that doesn't exist. And like, to understand with what we said here wasn't just to reach a state of nirvana. It's to allow yourself to be fully human and explore what that actually means.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's so important to us too, as both, perfectionists in recovery, recovering perfectionists, to create a space for people to be messy together, to not have it all together, to just show up however you are. That really matters to us. And yeah, it just feels like there aren't enough spaces like that necessarily, and especially as women, I think, and women in medicine, there's just so much conditioning to appear a certain way. And so for us, contextualizing that is really important too, which is that like we have been conditioned through the system of patriarchy to show up a certain way. So it's not your fault that this is how we've all kind of, I shouldn't say everyone, I don't know, it's been my experience, but it's not your fault, but now we can maybe see it a little bit more clearly and choose how we actually want to show up.
It's huge. I just had this discussion with somebody so I started my YouTube channel. I just had gained significant amount of weight from my eating disorder, and so it's all on my face. And it's an interesting time to start a YouTube channel when you're feeling so uncomfortable. And I had traditional braces, my first career as a dentist. So I'm like hyper aware that my teeth look black on the screen. And so I just, throw yourself in, get some exposure. But what I realized was that was part of just abandoning that perfectionism, because if I didn't start it then, it was just this compelling, I need to get these messages out. I need to have these people share their stories. I need to do this now. And that sense of urgency, because of what we've just said, we realize that life is too short for all this drama and all the superficial stuff to matter. But that was so freeing. And then I realized that I just started a master's in therapy, and one of it was talking about how you need to have perfect grammar. And I was this trigger fest in me. I'm like, oh, not again. And then I realized I can give myself permission to take this as okay, you do your best, let it go, do your best. But I'm oh, all those perfectionistic things are coming out right now. But I realized too, is that when I watch things online, what I'm most attracted to is these high achieving professionals allowed to be just authentically them. There's a reason why you'll never see me dressed up in business. If I'm in business clothes, I'm hating it. I just hate it. I do not, that's not me. It is, some people like to show up in in whatever outfit. I don't care what people show up in, as long as that they feel like they can be themselves. But it helped me to learn that if I have to go apply for a job, and I have to then, when I was an oral surgery resident, when I applied for that and interviewed, I had to put on a black suit and look like everybody else. And that was the first time I really observed, I went to my first interview, I was the only one without a black suit on. So I had to get a black suit for the rest of my interviews. And I was I don't like how this feels. But I didn't yet have what we're talking about now, is the awareness is because you're being forced to appear more like a male, because as a male, I was in the military, that's a male dominated field. And my essential self is that person frolicking in the fields with a t-shirt on and carefree, maybe without shoes on, right? So to give it, I realize now that I don't actually ever have to apply to a job that makes me to conform to that ever. I don't actually have to consider taking a job that makes me dress up in business clothes every day, because that feels awful.
And it feels good to say that to yourself, that you don't have to do that.
Yeah. And then to try to observe when you still apply those things, and why am I doing that? Right.
Right.
But I need a job.
Yes.
Yeah. But there is awareness. It's okay, well, how did that feel? And is it sustainable? It's not sustainable. Maybe I can do it for a presentation. Okay. It fits. I'm not going to be disrespectful. I'm going to show up for certain things. But if I had to do that day in and day out, you make exceptions for things when your values align. But just to throw that out there for people, I went from full-time clinical faculty to full-time remote due to COVID, and didn't go back to clinic, because I was wait, people they actually have jobs that they could do whatever they want. They could work from home if they want, but there's so much judgment in medicine when you step out of a clinic. It's there's no moral good or bad from being in a clinic, especially the manufactured way that we're practicing healing. It's not what we signed up for. It doesn't often align with people's moral values, but they put this moral stamp on it. I have to stay here because I have made this moral commitment to be this healer. I'm but you can be a healer in so many different ways, often better when you remove yourself from the place that is limiting your capacity to practice in a way that aligns with your true nature.
Right. I'm hearing some parts that feel guilty
Yeah.
about doing the thing that feels good to me because that means I'm not then doing XYZ. But then I also hear you say, hold on, that's a story that I've told myself that showing up in clinic in a suit is the only way for me to serve the world. And you're questioning that and you're saying, what if I kind of expanded that and asked myself, what are all of the ways that I could serve the world that may actually also still feel, if not great, at least like decent in my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And like even breaking it down to I'm a person who, right? People are like, I'm a person who practices medicine and this is what that looks like. Well, I'm a person who, whatever your values are, right? It's separating that identity that is more restricted and expanding it by breaking down the values and then seeing where else could these values be true.
Yeah.
I love talking to you both.
Yeah,
just
great.
Reflecting back on our discussions, is there a last takeaway that each of you want to share with the audience?
I think just really building off your last comment, kind of the way I read it, which this is through my lens, which may or may not be accurate. I think if you're feeling stuck in your life, like you're living someone else's life or you don't have choices, this is just the way things have to be. And that is, and it feels like not good. I would just suggest that doesn't have to be true. And that, that's kind of the work that we're trying to do, is to say, like, you probably have more choice than you realize. You may be living someone else's life. That is not going to change probably right away. Sometimes we have big things that happen, like with Shandra, where it was like she lost her sister and she made a big shift. It doesn't happen for everybody. Sometimes it's a slow walk toward your authentic self. And that's what we want to support you in doing. So, yeah.
Yeah. And what I would say is this journey of just being human, exploring the ups and downs of life and finding our truth and our authentic self, I really believe is meant to be done in community with other people. To me, this work is all about community, connection, and belonging to ourselves, and then belonging to each other. And so, yeah, it's just an honor to get to walk together with other women as we offer this work in the world.
That's beautiful. I love it. And I agree with that community. As someone who tried to walk it alone, I was like, heck no, that's not a great idea. Especially when you feel at times like, does my life even matter? Like you want a community around you if you have those thoughts. And what's the best way for people to find you?
For me, my website, chandrabauer.com. And on there's links to my social media, which I have a sometimes present, oftentimes not present status on. And then I'll just put a little plug in for Sarah and I just started writing together on Substack.
Nice.
So we started a Substack newsletter that we send out weekly, and we just alternate writing little essays and stories about our journey, exploring the wellness world and finding and living from this space of inner direction. It's called the Inner Compass. So
Yay. All right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hear it again, but I'm gonna write it down right now so I can check it out before I'm editing this.
Yes, I emailed it to you too, Jillian.
Oh, okay, cool. Perfect.
Yeah. I just it's really new work, really vulnerable work. It's like a threshold for us to write things and put them out there. And we had a really fun experience this past spring where we went to a retreat and left early, which is a story for another time. But afterward, we were just talking about all of the things we've tried and how that in and of itself, like we've learned so much. Just even in the like things that have gone poorly or have been hilarious or awkward. So anyway, And then I have a website, sarahwebbermdcoaching.com. Here and there also on social media, but yeah, we both have love-hate relationship. Not actually, no love, just mostly dislike, but
Complicated.
with
It's
the
like
social media.
complicated. It's also complicated. I live on social media a little bit, but I have like death anxiety, and part of my death anxiety commitment to myself is to be off social media and live more. Because I actually got on
I love that.
social media because I was so afraid to go out and live. But you're
Mm.
just channeling what we talked about today. It's even reinforcing that plan so much more. I will share all of your links down below and release you into the wild for today. But of course, I'd love to have you back on. And in the meantime, make sure that people have that invitation to get connected to you and read about your fun stories, the things that worked out, the things that also worked out in different ways than maybe they thought you were going to have them work out. So thank you both for being here today.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you
Jillian.
so much. Yeah.
And for the audience, as always, make sure to share your reflections, your questions, your thoughts down below. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, thanks for being here.